Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. UFC Long Island, Brian Ortega versus Yair Rodriguez just ended, and this is going to be my post-fight for the main event, Ortega versus Rodriguez. A little bit of a controversial ending. I think a lot of people are going to be left, after watching this fight, a bit unsatisfied, myself included. But I really think there are some key takeaways we can look at this fight and say, okay, it wasn't all bad. And I think we saw some things. We got some answers to some questions that we might have had going into this fight. So first off, going into this fight, I was super hyped for this fight. Brian Ortega is super durable. Yair super durable. Both guys are pretty well rounded. You have Ortega, who's elite of the elite with his submissions and his jiu-jitsu skills. And then you have Yair Rodriguez, who has elite level kicks, flashy kicks, and he's great in the striking department. And I thought this fight was going to be very interesting because it was basically a battle of grappler versus striker. Would Brian Ortega be able to get him down and submit him, or would Yair Rodriguez be able to keep it standing and light him up on the feet? And going into this fight, my prediction, I thought Yair would get maybe a third round stoppage. I just thought Yair was the better striker. I thought he'd be able to keep Brian Ortega off of him, defend the takedowns, and I thought he was going to be conservative early in the fight and not throw crazy flashy kicks and end up slipping and falling onto his back and end up in a submission by Brian Ortega. And that's kind of how the fight played out early a little bit. Only lasted about, I think, 4 minutes. As the fight went on, Brian Ortega, typical Brian Ortega, just pressing forward. Not a crazy amount of footwork, not a crazy amount of head movement. Yair landed some good punches. Yair looked much faster than Brian Ortega, was lighting him up with hard punches. I mean, he was stinging him badly. The commentary wasn't even acknowledging it. They were talking about other things. But Yair was landing some good straight punches and snapping Brian Ortega's head back. Brian Ortega landed some decent shots as well. Nothing crazy. He cut the eye of Yair Rodriguez. I'm not sure exactly what did. I think it was a left hand. And then I think midway through the first round, Brian Ortega kind of closed the distance a little bit on Yair, pushed him against the fence, was looking for a couple takedowns. There was about a minute or so they were against the fence, and he kept looking for the takedown, and Yair was just able to keep his balance and not allow Brian Ortega to take him down. And as the fight went on, he eventually circled out from that clinch position against the fence, and it went back to the striking. And again, Yair landing some good shots on the feet, mainly punches, but he was also kicking the legs of Brian Ortega. And then eventually, the same thing happens again. Brian Ortega grabs a hold of Yair Rodriguez, pushes him against the fence, starts looking for the takedown again. He actually gets him down this time, and they were barely on the ground for a long period of time. Now, Yair Rodriguez immediately started to scramble. There was a position where it was almost looking like he was going for an armbar, like an Andre Muniz armbar type, where he kind of bends the arm back. But it really wasn't there at all. He was just using this position to be able to try to scramble back to his feet and not allow Brian Ortega to cement the top position. And while this position was going on, there was a little bit of pressure on the shoulder of Brian Ortega from like the hips, the groin area, the leg area of Yair Rodriguez. And Brian Ortega went to pull his arm out. And while he went to pull his arm out, his shoulder dislocated. He immediately fell back in pain. The fight was stopped. It was a super unsatisfying ending. But my initial reaction, and it's changed a little bit now that I've thought about it, watched a little bit more of the replay. I thought I saw all I needed to see in this fight. Yair Rodriguez was lighting him up on the feet, but at the same time, you really think about it, Brian Ortega had just gotten him down. And if he got him down in the first round, was he going to be able to get him down in other rounds? Even if he wasn't able to submit him in that first round, could he have gotten a submission? Maybe. But at the end of the day, this is stuff that happens in MMA. And I feel like Yair should still get some credit for this. He was doing a good job defending. He was probably going to scramble back to his feet. It's hard to say, though. Brian Ortega has elite level jiu-jitsu. Who knows? Yair could have made a mistake. Next thing you know, Brian Ortega's on his back. So I get the fact that it's super unsatisfying. I get it. We were all looking forward to this amazing featherweight fight. Maybe potentially a title shot for Yair Rodriguez if he wins. We'll talk about that in a minute as well. And we kind of get this anticlimactic ending where Brian Ortega kind of gets an injury where I think a lot of people are going to call this a fluke. Now, was it a kind of a freak injury? Kind of. But the positioning, the scrambling of Yair kind of caused it. It's not going to happen every single time. And I think forget about that. I think we have to give Yair credit for what he did on the feet while the fight lasted. He did a good job defending the initial takedown attempts. I don't know how many attempts you want to call it in that clinch position, but there was multiple times where Brian Ortega was trying to shift his weight And I don't know if you want to count that as one or multiple or what you even count them at all, because maybe Ortega wasn't 100% full-fledged trying to take him down in those positions. He was just trying to get him to change the angles and change his weight distribution and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, Yair landed some good strikes. He was battering Ortega on the feet. And I know somebody's going to say, dude, what are you talking about? I'm telling you, regardless of what the commentary was saying, Yair was battering him on the feet badly, had stung him multiple times on the feet, landing some good inside leg kicks, landed a couple kicks to the body. And Yair was clearly a superior striker. And I get it. Brian Ortega is the guy that, most people were picking Brian Ortega by submission. And I understand that it could have happened. But the people calling for the rematch, don't get me wrong, I would love to see Yair Rodriguez versus Brian Ortega run back just because of that injury. I think Brian Ortega deserves it. I think, there is enough, wondering about what would have really happened had this fight continued. I'm not saying, I 100% think Yair was going to win regardless of, this injury. We don't really know. It's still up in the air. So I would love to see it ran back. But here's my problem. Brian Ortega's had multiple surgeries on his shoulder. Who knows what the injury is here? If it's just a simple injury, they pop the shoulder back in, he can return in 3 months. I'm fine. Rebook it. Rebook the fight. I'm fine with that. I'm 100% supportive of that. But if Brian Ortega is going to be out for, let's say, the rest of the year or even longer than that, I think it's, we move Yair Rodriguez on to something else. And whether that's a title shot or something else, we'll talk about that in a second. But I think, I think you can admit that this was an unsatisfying ending. I think you can understand that maybe Brian Ortega could have still won. I'm not saying he was getting destroyed the whole fight and this happened in the 5th round. But I think you can also admit that Yair Rodriguez was doing very well in the stand-up. He was doing very well defending the takedowns. And he was doing a decent job, probably going to scramble back to his feet. We don't know for 100% certainty. Without, I don't think you have to be on one side or the other. I think Yair Rodriguez deserves some solid credit for this win over a guy like Brian Ortega, who's super, tough to figure out because he puts pressure on you, hoping that, maybe you can't get off with some power strikes and then eventually you make a mistake or he shoots it on a takedown, gets you down and submits you. So he's a tricky guy to fight. And Yair was looking very good. And it's not like this happened in the first minute. It's not like Brian Ortega ragdolled him to the ground. Next thing you know, he had a dislocated shoulder. We saw this for about 4.5 minutes of the fight. So give Yair Rodriguez the credit he deserves for doing solid in this fight. And he gets a win, and I get that it's unfortunate. As far as what's next for Yair, I'm in a weird situation because I'm a person who's always saying I want a meritocracy when it comes to UFC title shots. And you have Josh Emmett, who I believe is on a 5-fight winning streak, probably the next in line for the title shot against Volk. But at the same time, I personally thought he lost to Calvin Kattar, and I thought he lost to Dan Ige. The Dan Ige was razor close. Emmett clearly won round 1. Not Yair. Dan Ige clearly won round 2. And I thought round 3 was razor close, and I thought Dan Ige took round 3. So for me, it's like, I really think Josh Emmett lost his last 2 fights. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. And then his style and what he did against Calvin Kattar, not that it wasn't a decent performance, but a lot of it, he won that fight punching the forearms of, Calvin Kattar. And I think the judges kind of scored that too favorably in that fight. And Yair Rodriguez, while I get, I wanted him to go out there and put on a masterful performance, because if he went out there and finished Brian Ortega, let's say by a switch kick or something in the first round, knocked him out cold, I think everyone would be clamoring for a Yair Rodriguez title shot. But now it's kind of up in the air. Credit to Yair. He said, I will rematch Brian Ortega, no problem. I respect that. He's not saying, I won this fight and blah, 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 because it was kind of a weird ending. But at the same time, depending on the timelines of everyone, I kind of want to see Alexander Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez. And I know it goes against everything I said about a meritocracy, because Yair's, even if you want to, if you can discount this fight, but if you want to count this fight as a win, which I count it as a win, you can't just disregard every fight where there's an injury. You can't do that. The person who won the fight won the fight. Brian Ortega could no longer continue. If the ref didn't jump in because of the shoulder injury, he would have jumped in when Yair was bashing his brains in with ground and pound after the injury. And I get it. It sucks. I've said it a million times. But at the same time, you got to give Yair some credit. And for me, Alexander Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez is so much more compelling than Alexander Volkanovski versus Josh Emmett. And I know it's sad to say, and I know that Josh Emmett has power and he has good wrestling, and maybe he could KO Volkanovski. I don't think it's going to happen. I do not see Josh Emmett being competitive with Volkanovski at all. Volkanovski is vastly improving every fight out, and I think he goes out there and absolutely smokes Josh Emmett. And Yair, while I don't necessarily favor Yair, I just think that would be a highly compelling fight because Volk would probably have to mix in the wrestling against Yair Rodriguez because I doubt Volk's going to stand there and just strike nonstop with Yair. But Volk has elite striking as well. Look, a lot of people thought, oh, Max Holloway's the best boxer in the UFC, and look what he did to Calvin Kattar, and he's going to win the trilogy. And he won the second fight against Volk. And Volk went out there and brutalized him. And just, I mean, he beat Max Holloway badly in the third fight, to the point that no one could even say, oh, Max won this fight. He went out there and 50-45'd him badly. He beat him up. So I'm curious to see because Yair's striking is ever improving. His kicks are the elite of the elite, and he has nasty power in his kicks. And his variety of attack is amazing. And Volk is so well-rounded, and he has elite level striking, great grappling, great jiu-jitsu defense. I'm curious how that fight would play out, and that's what makes it so compelling to me. I'm curious, would Volk just try to strike with him? Because Volk's very defensively sound. He could probably block a lot of those kicks of Yair, and he's probably going to be chopping the legs of Yair as well. But is Volk going to go out there and take Yair down and just, because the obvious path to victory, when I look at Volk versus Yair, I would see Volk taking Yair to the ground, beating him up on the ground, maybe eventually getting submission or ground and pound finish, third or fourth round, something along those lines. I just think that fight is far more compelling. But Yair's only on a one-fight win streak. So I don't know what the UFC does. Volk's got an injured thumb. We don't know how long he's going to be gone. Ortega's got the popped-out shoulder. We don't know how long he's going to be gone. Josh Emmett, I think he's ready to go before the end of the year. Volk has said before the injury he wants to be active, so who knows? Let's just say Volk's ready to come back, maybe November, October, November, December. I guess book Volk versus Emmett. And maybe do Yair versus Arnold Allen. They could do something along those lines. Or let's say Volk's going to be out for a while. Let's say, he's got to heal up that thumb injury. Let's do Yair versus Emmett for the #1 contender spot. I would love to see that fight. I know people are saying, well, Emmett's not going to take that fight. He's not a guy, he's on a 5-fight win streak. He's demanding a title shot. That's not going to work with the UFC. You will get passed by in a heartbeat. Next man up. If Emmett gets offered a main event against Yair Rodriguez for a #1 contender fight, and Emmett says, nah, I'm waiting for a title, guess what's going to happen? Yair's getting that title shot. We've seen it time and time again, even with champions saying, oh, I don't want to fight that guy. I can't make that fight. Well, interim title fight, and you can come back and fight the winner of that fight. We've seen it time and time again. So I don't think Josh Emmett is in a position to call shots at all. So that would be an ideal scenario for me because then Emmett doesn't get passed over. Yair kind of gets his shot to earn it. And if Yair loses to Emmett, then Emmett clearly deserves the shot. I mean, he already kind of clearly deserves it. But still, I think there's a gray area because of the potential 2 losses. At least the 1 loss to Calvin Kattar, which I thought was pretty clear. But this fight night kind of, it wasn't particularly amazing. The Matt Schnell versus Sumadari fight was amazing. Absolutely amazing. That second round might have been the best single round of the entire year. Matt Schnell was hurt badly multiple times, out on his feet, and came back, hurt Sumadari with a right hand, ended up getting him down, mounting him, beating him to death. Then Sumadari reversed, ended up in a triangle, and got choked out. Crazy, wild fight. The main card itself was not particularly great. I'm not going to talk about a lot of these fights on the card. Shane Burgos versus Charles Jourdain was pretty good as well. Charles Jourdain, I thought, actually won the first and the third round. First was razor close, though, so it could have gone either way. Second round was clearly Burgos. He dominated him in the grappling department. But in this fight card, UFC Long Island, most people were excited for Brian Ortega versus Yair. And we got a few answers. We saw that, I think we already knew this, though. Rodriguez was clearly the better striker. But we had to see what was Yair's submission defense and jiu-jitsu going to look like on the bottom with Brian Ortega on top of him. And we didn't get to see a whole lot. And I think Yair still deserves credit for what he did in this fight. But at the end of the day, it's an unfortunate series of events. So I think that pretty much does it. Before you guys leave the video, let me know which fight would you rather see, Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez or Volkanovski versus Josh Emmett. Comment down below. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.